Hey guys, Mike here. Apologize for the poor sound quality. My microphone is pretty crappy. But in today's tutorial, I'm going to go through a very simple website, and I'm going to show you how to set up a website that's running on top of Vue JS on the front end. So Vue JS is the JavaScript framework that's dynamic and returns data, and it's kind of like the front end, the visual side of your website. On the back end, we'll be using FastAPI. It's a Python framework, and for this example, it's using FastAPI. But in your scenario, you can use any kind of backend. You can use JavaScript backend or servers, Java, anything you want that serves data, or even APIs that are live on the internet. In this case, we're using FastAPI because it's a very simple API framework to set up, and it's got tons of features. And if you want to check out my other video tutorial on FastAPI, you can look in the description of this video for a full FastAPI tutorial. In this case, we're going to set up a very simple website of 80s action movie stars. I didn't know what kind of examples to serve. I figure everybody loves 80s action movies, so this is just a very simple site. It'll just fetch movie stars from the backend, from the Python FastAPI. So when you click on a button, it will fetch actors and their movies. Very, very simple stuff, right? Additionally, I'm going to show you how to set up environments. So in this case, we're going to have a development environment and a production environment. Obviously, development environment is you're working on the same code base, and if you want to add new features, work on some bugs, etc., you will work on development environment. And when you're actually ready to serve your site using the same code base, just passing a different runtime command, you can serve production, which is the stable branch of your code. And third part of the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to run this whole thing on a cloud instance on a server. As well as register a domain name, and in addition also to create certificates to secure this website with HTTPS. You obviously don't want to run any website with HTTP, not just because it's insecure, but because modern browsers will just basically they will blacklist your site. It'll just say, this website is insecure, so many people are just not going to visit your site. So this will show you how to create SSL certificates using Let's Encrypt, which is a great service that gives you free certificates for your website. Okay, so let me start off, I guess. First, let's create a project template. So in our project, we'll have a general folder. Let's call this project Movie Star, right? So I'm just going to make a directory here called Movie Stars. Go into this directory, right? And here I will create two folders. So the first folder is going to be called API. This is going to be our FastAPI backend. This is the thing that's going to serve the data in form of JSON to the front end. So the computer I'm working on already has all these packages installed, but in your scenario, you want to make sure you install pipenv, which is a Python virtual environment manager. So you can install packages, you can create virtual environments, all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to go into how to install it just for the sake of time, but you can Google it. Tons of articles how to do it. So you'll need pipenv, you'll need Node.js as well. So you'll need to install that to run the Vue framework. And let's see, what else do you need? Yeah, that's pretty much it for now. Okay, so let's go into our Movie Stars folder. And here we have one folder called API. That's going to be our Python. And what we will do is we will use Vue to create, well, I guess let's go first to how do we install Vue. So Vue is a JavaScript web framework, and the way you can install it is you can type in, once you install Node.js, which is the JavaScript server, you can do npm, which is Node Package Manager. That's part of the Node.js package that you install. You can do install-g for global, and you can say Vue CLI, and this will install the Vue framework on your computer. Once that's done, what we will do is we're going to create a new project called the web. That's going to be our front-facing. That's going to be the front face of your website, the visual front face. Here I'm going to select all the default options. It will create all the packages, folders, anything you might need in the web folder. So you can see here, this is the folder that it creates right here, Movie Stars Web. Might take a little bit while. Should be done soon though. One thing I noticed about Vue and other JavaScript frameworks, I'm a Python background guy. I'm not really a JavaScript guy, so JavaScript is just very chatty, very noisy. It's pretty heavy as well. So when you install this, you'll see the web folder is pretty big. It's like 200 megabytes, so it installs tons of packages. So don't be alarmed when you see that. Unfortunately, that's how JavaScript is. But that's what we have to work with for a single-page application type project. You can't do stuff with Python. Python is only good on the server side. On the client side, on the browser side, you obviously need JavaScript. There's just no way around it, unfortunately. Okay, once we go into the web folder, you can see here, this is the entire project structure here. You can see all the node modules. This is like the dependencies that Vue JS will need are installed here. If you want to Git save your project, make sure your git ignore file has this folder in the git ignore file. What you don't want to do is push all your node modules to your Git repository. Obviously, those 176 megabytes it's a very large number. Package.json, it's kind of like the brain of your Vue your JavaScript project. This shows you all the packages that you need to install in case you need to reinstall things. But it also has a bunch of other stuff here, like scripts, like what to do with your project. You can pass environment variables. You can do a lot of stuff with this package.json. It's a very important file. Okay, so let me go into this project here. So let's do this first. So now that we installed our Vue JS, I'm going to leave it alone for now, and I'm going to go into our backend. So here you can see our API is empty right now. It's just a simple folder. So what I will do is I'm going to install, let's do the backend API stuff first, and then we'll move over to the web, to the front end. And this is going to be a very simple API. It's just going to serve a JSON file full of movie stars and their movies, right? So it's very simple, baby steps, and I want to keep it that way. I don't want to confuse people. Usually I look at tutorials; they're just too verbose on things, and you get lost with doing complex stuff. This is very simple, serving a simple JSON to the front end, and that's all we're going to do for now. Okay, so here what we will do is we will say pip-env, and I'm going to specify Python. Oh, I guess I did this before. So what I'm telling pip-env to do is to install these packages using my Python 3.8 environment. Now the reason is I want to separate these from the global packages. I want to put this in a virtual environment type bubble, I guess. When you do that, pip-env will go ahead and create a virtual environment for us and install the packages. Okay, it's done now. And you can see it created the pip file and pip file lock. You know what? Let me open this up in VS Code. Give me a second. I think this will be better. Let me pause this for a second. Hey guys, okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. All right, so I opened this up in VS Code just so we can switch between terminal and code in the same window, in the same screen. Okay, so you can see here a pip file has been installed. You can see that it installed all the packages that we need, and it also pins the specific Python version here that that you'll be running. What we're going to do is we're going to add a script section that's telling Python what to run. So it's like your command, like run what. So for example, for prod, we're going to say python run.py prod. And for dev, we're going to say python run.py dev. And I'll explain what these do in a second. So obviously prod and dev, these are our development environments, and what we're going to do is we're going to build out the backend right now with these environments in mind. So first we're going to create a file called run.py. We're going to do this in the root of the movie stars folder, not under API, but in the root. Okay. And here what we will do is very simple. We will import a web server called UVcorn. This will serve our Python backend. From config, we're going to import a bunch of variables. Config is a file, so we're going to create it in 1 second. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the port that we want to run this on, bind, meaning like which interface we want to bind it to, how many workers we want to run, and reload. And what you'll see is that these will be dynamic. So meaning like if it's dev, we'll have only one worker, and it's going to be a hot reload, meaning like if you make any changes to your code, the whole application will restart, will regenerate, because it knows that there's a code change detection. If it's production, we can put like 10 workers or whatever, right? Because you want as many threads of this application running as possible in production. And reload is going to be false because you don't want to reload your production if there's any code that's modified accidentally, for example. Okay, so here we're going to create a file called config. That's where we're going to import this stuff from. And for config, I am going to paste this, and I'll go through what this does. So here we're just going to import a couple of modules. We're going to import a module called .env. This is so we can import environment files, and this is very important in development. And this is part of the 12-factor app. It's basically it's kind of like best practices when you're designing applications for security. What we're going to do is we're going to import these variables that we just talked about from environment variables, so from environment files. So we're going to create, for example, a file called env.dev. This is our development environment, and the reason it's dot in the front here is because it's a hidden file, and we don't want to check this into GitHub, for example. So if you're developing a project, let's create a new file here called git ignore, and you're going to say env.star. We don't want to check these in because, for example, if you have a database connection, right, you can say database password, something like that, right? Imagine this is production. You don't want your passwords and things like that out in on the GitHub or wherever. So this is why we have these ends, and when you go to production, you just copy this file into production server, and it just stays there, right? So this config will load this dot file and then get all those variables from there. Before I go any further, let me just do pip and install. I don't think we installed this .env, so I think what we need is python.env, right? Let me see. Yes, it's called python.env. So we're just going to install this package just to make sure we have it in our virtual environment. We're going to create a base directory. This is in case like you want to use, for example, where's the root of this project. So the root of this project is /home, blah, 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 /movie stars. And that's what it gives you. Logs is like, we're going to basically log this whole backend application to this log here. We're going to bind it to all our interfaces, so 000. Here we're telling it when you run pipenv, so for example pip and run dev, we want to run development environment. If you don't provide the run dev, if you just do this, it's missing a command, right? So you definitely need an environment variable when you start this whole thing up. Here we're joining the path, so basically it's looking for a file that you provide. So for example, if it's dev, it's going to load .env. And what it does is when it loads that file, it creates environment variables inside of the shell. So this is like your bash shell environment variables. So we're going to go ahead and populate this. So for example, for development, what I'm going to do is create these variables. So here's my development. Port, I'm going to run it on 5201. You can choose any port you want. Workers only one because it's development and we don't need many workers, right? We're just testing stuff. Reload is true. This is hot reload. Cores origins is basically when you run your backend, it controls who can access your backend API. You obviously don't want star in production because you don't want everybody just hitting your backend if, let's say, you don't have any firewall enabled, things like that. In this case, I'm going to put star just for troubleshooting. So this star means anyone can, from any IP, if they can get into your computer, they can hit your backend. But, you know, obviously, you know, if you're running this on a public server, then this will work. But if you're just on your home laptop or whatever, there's obviously, unless somebody's in your network, you're not going to have this case. So I'm just going to leave star for now because it's development. I'm going to create a new file called env-prod. So this one's going to be similar, but so a couple of things will change. The port will change. So here my port is 5301 instead of 5201. I'm going to put 5 workers just to start off, right? And I'm not going to reload it. Here I'm telling it that the only one allowed to call an API is our Vue service, and our Vue service is going to run on this port. So this is our front end right here. So I'm telling it for prod, hey, only this service can access this API backend. Okay, so we're done here. So config API, so this is what I need. So we got our parameters here, origins. This is for cross-origin resource. I forgot what it stands for, cross-origin resource security or something like that. But we'll get to it in a second. So the run API is your starter script for your backend, right? So this is this first Python file that gets called. Once it gets called, it grabs all these variables and it starts the Python unicorn server, and it starts running your app. Right now, if we were to run this, it wouldn't work. So because we don't have our backend built up yet, right? So if we try to run prod, for example, it'll crap out. It says app is not found because we didn't build it out yet. So we're going to do that right now. So as you can see here, it's looking for a folder called API, which is we created over here. So now in that folder, what we're going to do, we will create an init.py. So this is the Python module file, right? So init __ init.py. Okay, so for here, what we're going to do is we're going to say from FastAPI. Yeah, that's okay. Import FastAPI from FastAPI .middleware.course import course middleware. So this is the stuff that protects our endpoint from malicious attacks. I'm going to import OS, and I'm going to import Leguru. So Leguru is a really nice Python module. It's for logging, so it's much nicer than the standard logging module. It's much easier to use. And you know, it's got way more options, more colorized output, really nice stuff. I use it everywhere. It's very simple to set up a logger. And also from config, from our config file, I'm going to import a couple of, for example, logdir, log file, and origins. These are cross-origin requests. Okay, so first I'm going to configure logging, right? So we want to log this backend API stuff to some log. So I'm going to say logdir equals, let me do also base dir. This is our root directory. So I'm going to say we're going to log to the root directory, and then slash, and I'm going to say logdir. And also we're going to check to make sure that the if the logging directory does not exist, we will create it. So we're going to create it right here if it doesn't exist. Very simple. Python reads like an English language. It's beautiful, right? It's like, it's so obvious what's happening here. And now I'm going to add the logger. So this is the Leguru logger. I'm going to say logdir plus file, log file. I'm going to give it a rotation, so if the file gets too big, it will automatically rotate it. That's part of the Guru features. You don't need any, log rotate, any of that crap. It'll just do it automatically. Let's say 10 megabytes, right? You can give it 1 megabyte, you can give it, there's tons of options if you look at their docs. Colorize equals true. We want colored output in the logs. Format, I don't know, we could do something like this here. Let me just paste it. It takes too long to type this, but this gives it a nice format. You can, by the way, see this whole thing in the GitHub repo in the description of the video. There's a link to this repo, so you don't need to freak out that you need to type all this. In logging error, I want it to log on everything, basically, just for now. Okay, at this point, we're going to initialize the app. We're going to say app equals FastAPI class. Origins, we will say it's a list, right? So the reason is, for example, if you say, if let's say on dev, for example, instead of star, you can say, HTTP, some website. Or you can say HTTP another website. So if you have multiple sites trying to access your environment, you can just pass a comma and give multiple origins. And that's the reason why we're providing a list there, because what it will do, it will basically go through this comma separated list and append them to this array, to this list / array, right? It's the same thing. So we're going to say for all in origins.split, and we're going to split that by comma. So remember, in that environment file, we said origins equals something like, HTTP, my website, site 1, and then comma, HTTP, site 2, comma, HTTP, site 3, right? So it pulls all that from that origins parameter. So what this does, it splits it up by the comma parameter here, and it creates a new array element for each site. And for origin and origin split, we're going to say origins.append origin, right? So now we have this array defined. We're going to say app add middleware, cores middleware, comma, allow origins. One sec. What's going on? Why is it not seeing my interpreter? I'm trying to pull up my proper Python environment, but I'm not seeing it for some reason. Is that it? I think that's it right here. Okay. Allow origins equals origins. So we're saying, any of these can go and hit our backend. Allow credentials true. We're not going to use this, so don't pay too much attention to it, but it's just part of the core stuff. Allow methods, we're going to say all methods, get, post, all that kind of stuff. Allow headers, these are HTTP headers, star. So we're going to allow headers, everything for now. You can customize this later if you want, but we're just going to leave it very simple for now. So this is our security, basically API security block here. Okay, and now here we're going to say from API.use import main. So here we're going to import the meat and potatoes of our API framework here. And for that, what we need to do is create a folder under the API folder called views. And in the views, we're going to create a new file called main.py. That's our meat and potatoes, right? Meat and potatoes and beer. All right, so from API import app, we need the app to serve the whole API data. I'm going to import the logger object to log stuff, right? Okay, so here what we're going to do is we will create a dictionary or a hash. In Ruby it's called hash, but basically a dictionary, right? We're going to create a dictionary of stars, movie stars, and their movies. So it's very simple. I'm just going to paste in instead of typing to save time. But you can see it's very simple. Here's a movie star. Here's the movie's key and the movie's value. And this is an array, right? Key, sub-dictionary, key, and values. So our VueJS will parse, this will be dumped as a JSON to our VueJS front end. And VueJS will parse this and display it on the screen as you saw here in this example. So this is a dictionary object, right? This is obviously a very simple example. In your real world environment, you're likely getting this data from a database query or like a larger data structure or wherever your data is coming from. But this is a very kind of simple baby step example. Okay, here I'm going to create a function, an app.get function. So this is a get HTTP call, and I'm going to call it fetch. So when Vue.js requests data, it's going to go to this endpoint /fetch. Async def, it's an asynchronous function, so it's going to run on it's not going to be blocking for an I/O. It's not going to be waiting for things to complete. In this case, you're not going to see any difference because it's a simple JSON callback. But imagine you're doing a data query, right? You have a large database, and your front end is saying, "Hey, get me all the movie stars from the 80s," right? Imagine you have thousands of these movie stars, thousands of movies. Now your database query is searching things, querying things, and other people are trying to use your website. If you don't have an async, your website may be slow because the processor is doing the query on one processor, and it'll be holding up other calls to your website. So async ensures that it's not waiting for things to complete if other users are doing stuff. Here we're going to give it a comment, returns 80s movie stars. I'm also going to log this. I'm going to say fetching movie stars, so we know what's happening here. And I'm going to simply return this dictionary. So this dictionary right here, I'm just going to return it to Vue.js and let Vue.js deal with it, right? Our job from the backend API standpoint is just to return this data. So at this point we're done. We think, yeah, there's nothing else here. So to test this, what we can do, we have all our files in place, and you can see we also have our environment files. So what we can do is test. We can do pip and run dev, and let's see if it starts up the server. It does start up. You can see here, it starts up on port 5201. And same thing with prod. That started up as well, as you can see, on a different port, 5301, which is great. This is what we want. Okay, so let's close our backend. That's done. And now we're going to work on our front end. So front end is a little bit more trickier. I'm not going to go too deep into Vue because it's a very large topic, but I'll just kind of show you how to structure a very simple website. Let me think. Let me see where I can start first. So let's go to the source folder under Vue.js. Let me close this API. So I'm under web. Web is our Vue.js, right? Under source, if you go to app.vue, by default, this is when you install your new project. What will happen is, these are boilerplate kind of like sample stuff. We don't really need any of this. We can delete this. We can delete hello world, and what I'm going to do is basically replace this with this code. Let me take this out too. What I'm doing is I am importing a component called movie star, and you can see under the components folder, I'm going to change this hello world. I'm going to rename it to movie star. Movie star.vue, right? And you can see here, you can read up more on Vue.js. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into it. Here's our movie star component. I'm importing it and I'm going to use it, and I'm also declaring it right here. You can see I'm also going to pass it. By default, it's passing some CSS styling as well. So app.vue doesn't really have much in it. It just calls your subcomponent, right? So I'm going to close this for now. So this is done. I'm going to go into movie star.vue. I'm going to take this whole thing. I'm going to delete it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste the movie star component, and you can again find this in the GitHub repo in the description of the video. And I'll just go through what this whole component does. So it looks a little scary if you've never seen Vue.js, but relax, I'm going to explain what this means. It's very simple. So with Vue.js, we're going to start at the bottom in between the script tags. This is kind of your engine, your entire data engine here. Here you're just declaring the name of this component, movie star, and you're saying this is the data that I want to return to the screen, to the browser. So in the beginning, we start off with an object called movie stars. This is our JSON data that we get from the backend, right? For now, we're going to make it null. It's basically, there's nothing there. We're just declaring it. This is our app environment. So when, again, like in Python, when we run pip and run dev or run prod, we're doing the same thing with Vue.js. We're passing it the environment. And I'll show you where this matters also. Here, down here, methods is a Vue.js term. It means functions. So if you're from Python background, think of it like functions, right? Here, the function is fetch movie stars. And what I'm telling it is to go fetch. Fetch is a keyword in Vue. And I'm saying endpoint, that's our URL. That's the backend API URL. /fetch. Remember /fetch? That was in our API main, right? It's this guy right here. It's calling this callback /fetch. And again, it's doing an async response. So just like in Python, it's an async callback. So it's very fast. It's awaiting for the response. Async await. I don't want to go too deep into it. Don't worry about this stuff. And finally, when it does receive the data from the Python backend, we're creating a variable called this movie stars. And you can see here, this movie stars equals API data, right? So it's saying, hey, Python backend, can you give me a JSON dump of all your movie stars? Right here, it's doing that. And then it says, now make this parameter the API, the JSON dump of that data. And in case we catch an error, then we console out the error. So by console, what this means is if you go to any website, right, you right click, you say inspect. Oh, just popped out here. Any modern browser will have this, right? And here what you will do is click on the console, and you can see here if there would be any errors, you would see the errors pop up over here. So right click, inspect, console errors. Okay. Okay, moving down the scripts, that's pretty much it. That's the engine of your script right here. That's your methods. Okay, so when we do call this component, it will call the backend, get the movie stars JSON dump, and now we're going to go up in here. This is our presentation layer. This is what actually shows you the data. So we have a class called movie star. Here we're saying if this is a dev environment, we're going to say that this is 80s movie stars development, right? And the else, if it's a prod, we're going to say 80s movie stars production, right? So this kind of gives you a header banner so you know exactly which environment you're in. So it's basically, you know, we know that this is production. Here we're going to create the actual table that shows the data. We're going to say if movie star. So if the data is there, if it's not null. So for example, if I refresh this website, we don't have this data yet because I didn't call the backend. So you can see here, there's nothing here, right? So only when I click this button does it call the backend to get the JSON. And now that it has this data in a JSON form, it creates this table. So that's what this is for. So because you don't want stuff on your web page that makes no sense unless the data is there. Here we're just creating a table, name and movies, and here we're creating rows, table rows, and we're iterating over the JSON structure. So you might have to play around with this when you're in your environment, but obviously this is a very simple JSON dump, so we're just saying star and the name in movie stars, and you have to provide a key. So the key is going to be the name of the actor. You can look up the key by looking at what data we're passing. So from the Python side, this is the key, this is the name of the actor, and this is the data for the key, right? So key, and then instead of star, maybe we could put data, whatever, I just called it star. So this is going to be the name, so curly bracket, that means pass the actual data value to the web page. And then for each name, we're going to do a bullet list for movie and star.movies. And the key is movie, right? So that's a sub key. So this is a key, and this is the data for that key. And here we're doing curly brackets again, and we're going to show the movies for each actor. So the final result will be your key, and then the movies for each actor. And finally, we're going to create a button to do the whole thing. So button, you're going to say if data. By the way, the button you only want it to be visible if. Sorry, this is a clear button. Where is the? So the first button we're going to do is the fetch button. This button will actually fetch your data, right? So it's going to go up top before the table is actually presented. You can see here, the button comes first. The second button is to clear everything, right? So go back to the beginning. So the first button, we're going to say at click, so meaning on the click of the button, we're going to call a method. So remember, the method is the Vue JS method, so or function if you want to call it, right? This is our name of the method. You can name it whatever you want, but you're telling the button, call that method, click to fetch. So once you call that, it calls the API backend. And the second button is to clear the whole thing, and we only want this button visible if there's data. If not, then this clear button makes no sense, right? It's a blank screen. Why would we need a clear button? So here, there's no clear button. Once you load the data, here's the clear button. And on clear, what you're doing is you're saying movie stars equals null. So you're unsetting this variable, and by unsetting this variable, remember we have the this condition here, VF movie stars. Once that variable is null, this whole thing becomes false. So it's not going to display this table. So that's why when you click clear, see the whole thing goes away. That's Vue JS. It's very nice. It's very dynamic. That's your front end part. So our website's pretty much done, right? So the components are there. The front end is done. The back end is done. Now, how do you serve the front end, right? So we know how to serve the back end. So let me open up a terminal for this. So for example, for front end, we know how to serve this. Give me a second, I'm opening up a different terminal. Okay. So let me make it bigger. Here you're in the root directory of your project, right? Your API and web are in here. So to run your backend, you just do pip manage run into dev, and your backend is started, right? Now to run your front end, it's very simple as well. Actually, before we run the front end, let me just go through one more kind of concept here. To run our front end, we don't need to open up the package JSON file. This is what I mentioned earlier. This kind of controls your whole project here. And then here, what I will do is I will replace some of this boilerplate stuff. This whole package, this whole file gets generated when you create a Vue project. And what I will do is in the script section, I'm going to paste instead of serve. This serve is a command, right? So these are all commands that you can kind of create. Here, what I will do is paste this this string. So let me just go through what this means. So when you say npm run dev, you're saying Vue.js start the dev environment or prod environment, right? And here we're going to pass the Vue endpoint parameters, variables. These are environment variables, just like in Python with those end files. Same concept here. There's probably better ways of doing it. I'm not a JavaScript, guy, so I'm just a civilian, right? So if you see a better way, put it in the comments. This works for me, so I'm just going to go here. So we're telling it that the endpoint to call is the 5201. That's our Python endpoint. It's currently running on that port, right? It's this guy right here. We're going to tell it that the environment is dev, and we need that because remember over here in our Vue movie star component, we're saying if this environment is dev, make sure to tell everybody, hey, this is the dev environment. Again, just like in Python, you want to separate environments not only for sanity but security as well. We're going to add this one here. So this is a Vue CLI service. This is just a command. It's part of Vue CLI package. You're going to serve this whole front end on port 5200, and you're going to say mode is development. So meaning like it's hot code reload. So if it detects changes, just like Python, if it detects changes, it'll regenerate your front end. For production, it's going to be a little bit different, and I'll don't get scared. I'll explain why this looks so different. So for example, here you're seeing HTTP localhost, and here we're going to say /API, and I'll get to it in just a little bit when we get to the Apache config section. This matters for Apache. And same thing here, we're going to say it's a prod environment. We're going to serve on different port, 5300 instead of 5200. -- mode production tells Vue CLI to optimize this whole build. So for example, if you run production, so I'm going to save that first. And before I run the VueJS front end, I'm going to do one more thing. So I need to tell this whole VueJS project what the endpoint is. So here's why. So if you open up Movie Star, your function here calls this variable called this $endpoint. It doesn't know what this means yet, right? So instead of hard coding HTTP localhost 5200/fetch, we're going to make this whole thing dynamic. So it changes according to which environment you're spinning on, because the API URL is going to be different, right? So production is going to be port 5300, for example. It could be a different server completely. It may not even be localhost. So this whole thing gets parameterized into your environments. And to do that, if you open up the main.js file here, this gets generated boilerplate, right? This is straight out of the box. When you generate a new Vue project, this gets created. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add this line. Vue prototype $endpoint. Vue prototype is just Vue JS speak for global variable. This is a global variable. So anytime your Vue methods need a variable called endpoint, they'll know to pull this variable. And this whole thing comes in from your environment variables that you pass through here. Again, so these are your environment variables, and you can see here our Vue app endpoint is going to be here, this one, right? If you go back here, you're going to see environment Vue app endpoint. You need to specify Vue app prefix, otherwise VueJS is just not going to know what the hell this is, apparently. This is JavaScript. Again, it's a pain in the ass. It's very verbose, but this is what we have to live with for now. Anyway, so yeah, it's very confusing, I guess, for beginners. It took me a while to kind of understand how this whole thing works. There's a lot of moving pieces here, but just remember, main.js is kind of like your main project JavaScript file that you define your all your components and things like that, and then these .vue files is your actual engine of your site. So now that we specified this, it's going to know what this endpoint is from your package.json. We're passing it directly from here. Okay, so now we can go ahead, we can start the front end. So we're going to start the back end, right? So this is actually, let me run prod, just so it's more fun. Prod is 5301, that's our prod, right? And let me just change that from API like this. I'm going to change it to HTTP local host 5301, just so we understand how this works, and I'll change it back later. Now to start the front end, I'm going to go to web. This is our VueJS, and I'm going to say npm run prod. Let's see if it starts up. Even though it says development server, it'll start in the production mode because we told it to start mode production. And what it does is it compiles your whole project, makes it much leaner, so it's less disk space, and it's much faster over the network. So for production websites, you definitely do not want to serve in dev mode because it'll take forever to load. And it tells you that your front end is running localhost 5300 and it's served in production mode. Okay, if you open up your browser, if you go to localhost 5300, there is your website. There it is, right? Very simple, very basic. Click to fetch, and it grabs the data from your backend. Boom, done. Okay, so we're done with this website. Looks good, right? Now, so the next topic is how do we run this whole freaking thing on a website, right? How do we host it on a website? How do we secure certificates, make it HTTPS secure? So let's do that now. And for this example, I am running it on a free DNS, free domain name service. So because I didn't want to pay for a domain, in your case, you'll probably have some domain, company.com, whatever it is, whatever your domain name is. If you want a free domain, you can. By the way, if you go to free DNS, it's got a really ugly interface, but it works. If you register, you can choose a subdomain and then the name of your site. So in my case, I chose the subdomain to be my.to, but there's tons of domains here. And then when you register it, it takes like maybe an hour or 30 minutes for it to be registered across global DNS. So you'll have to wait a little bit until every DNS server knows what this means. And I'm serving this on a DigitalOcean server. So in my case, the DigitalOcean, you can serve it on any server that has a public IP, right? So anything that has a public-facing internet IP. And so, for example, this is my DigitalOcean server. It's just a small CentOS 7 server. And then to get the public IP of your server, if you type in curl for ICANN-has-IP, to understand what your IP is, right? What other servers know your server as. So, for example, this is my IP, right? By the way, always a good idea to firewall your server. So in my case, I have a firewall here. It blocks any outside intrusions. So always make sure you do that on your server. Otherwise, you're going to get hacked. Okay, so this server already has all this. And I went ahead and copied this whole website here. You can see it's the same thing as on my desktop, so I need to turn this off. So now we're going to be running from the server, right? So assuming you did this as well, you installed everything, copied it, you can test it, and it works on the local host, right? Now, when it works on the local host, you can't present it to the public because it's tied to your local host server. It's not tied to any web server. So what we need to do at this point is to create a web server tie-in to your website. So you need a public-facing web server, something like Nginx, Apache, Caddy. Caddy is a great choice. There's tons of them, right? There's tons of web servers. So in this case, I'm using Apache because it's very common. There's a million Apache modules and configurations. So what we need to do is, once you install Apache, I'm not going to go through it, but you can Google it. In this case, we're going to go to the Apache folder. And you can see this is standard Apache file structure, right? This is our Apache web server on this DigitalOcean server. If you go to the conf directory, if you type in, I've already created this configuration, but for the purpose of demonstration, I'm going to go through what this means. Don't get too caught up on this. This is just standard Apache stuff. And again, this is in the GitHub repo in the description of the video. You can pull it from there. I'm telling it to use the proxy module. So this is basically if you want to proxy things like proxy HTTP requests. This is a log that I'm logging to. And here I'm going to give it a server name. So for example, the server name of my server of this website is actionstars.my.to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to redirect it to the HTTPS version. The whole point of this whole thing is that we want to secure it with HTTPS, with certificates. And here's HTTPS. Now, let me just do this. There's some boilerplate stuff that gets added on here by certificate, so let me just remove all this for now. Okay. So here is our redirect to HTTPS, and here is our HTTPS block. Anything with 443 is HTTPS. Here again, we're saying which server domain this is pinned to. So Apache is listening for any calls, any requests to this domain name. It's going to do the SSL engine on, proxy engine on. It's going to proxy this request. A couple of additional options. I'm not going to go through it, but basically, when you see this / this is your root. So it's going to say anything coming into this website, right? Proxy it to localhost 5300 to the VueJS front interface. Now here's the problem. If I remove these right here, what's going to happen is your browser will complain that a person is trying to access your website. Then your website will start querying the backend. But the problem is this is already encrypted with HTTPS. Your backend is not encrypted, and your browser will complain. So now the way to fix this problem is to add this proxy pass saying anything that goes to your backend API / API. Proxy it to the API port localhost 5301. So this is your Python FastAPI right here. So this is the reason why I had that /API in that package.json file. This way your browser is not going to complain because everything is done in the backend. So imagine a person hits your website. Your website is basically Vue.js, right? Vue.js says, hey, I have a request for movie stars. It goes and queries the backend locally. So this is between localhost. When it gets the data, it brings that data back to your front-facing Vue.js, right? Browser is proxying that API request here, so it's not going to complain that it's not encrypted. But when the data reaches the end user, it goes through an encrypted communication. So when I click fetch here, this is all encrypted. Okay, so this is done. I'm just going to go back and, well, this is already, one second. I'm going to go to web here for a second. I'm just going to check that package.json. Just want to see what's here. So here for prod, we're saying the Python endpoint is /API. This is the same thing that we saw in the Apache config. So this is properly configured. Okay, now one more thing we need to do is we need to create certificates. We need to create certificates for this website, and a very simple way to do it. You need to install a package called certbot. And certbot is it's a package by let me see. Give me a second. Certbot is a product made by Let's Encrypt, and it encrypts your website. So assuming you registered your domain with the DNS service and your IP address, certbot knows that that's tied to your public IP. So when we go and we create a domain name on any kind of server, any kind of domain service. So for example, my domain is tied to, sorry, I can't find it here, but basically my website, this name is tied to my public IP, right? So it's tied to this, whatever this IP is. So this website is tied to this IP. So certbot will check that to make sure that there is a link between the name and the IP. And if there isn't a link, it will go ahead and create certs for you. So for example, so to create certs, what I'll do is I'll say certbot --Apache. And what's cool about certbot, it'll actually update your Apache configuration with the proper certs. I'm going to say D, and I'm going to give it the name of the site. So in my case, the name of the site is actionstars.my.to. But here you'll put whatever your domain name obviously is. So Let's Encrypt is looking for a verification. It's doing a check to make sure you actually own the domain name and the domain name is tied to your web server. And then it looks for an Apache configuration file, and what it will do is automatically inject the certs into this conf file. It's really nice. You don't have to do anything manually. So this is now updated. So if you go and open this file, you'll see that Let's Encrypt certbot already did this for you. So here it is. See these blocks? These were injected by Let's Encrypt. It's really nice, and it creates these files right here. These are the actual certificates. Pretty nice. And it also adds this part right here. Okay, so your Apache is ready to go. Make sure your Apache server is running. And as you can see here, this is the actual server we just saw. It's running this whole thing. If you click on this little lock icon, you can see certificate is valid. If you click on that, you'll see that it's part of Let's Encrypt. It'll expire every 3 months. That's just the nature of Let's Encrypt. It's you know, the whole design of it is that there's no stale certificates, so it needs to be reissued. Reissuing is very simple. You just do certbot renew. You know, let's say 90 days from now, you just run this. You certbot renew. It'll go ahead and try to renew your certs. Here it's going to say they're not yet due for renewal, but in 90 days you will. Very simple stuff, right? Done. That's your entire site. Let me see what else I'm missing here. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll try to get to it, but very simple website. Hopefully it kind of cleared some questions up and helps you develop your own project. Thanks. Hey guys, just forgot to mention one more thing. So now that we have our server running, you know, the way we start up VueJS and Python backend, we do, you know, npm run prod, npm run dev, pip env run prod, pip env run dev. Obviously, you know, these are good for testing, but when you want to run a production website, you can't do that because, you know, once you leave the terminal, your whole process will basically disappear. So for that, if you look in the utils, let me see if I have it here. Let's create a new folder here called utils, and what this will do is we'll create systemd service scripts. So these are your scripts to start your entire website, the back end and the front end. So for example, for your front end, let's create a service called moviestarweb.service. And here, this is your typical systemd startup script. So let me just paste that in here. Here you're going to replace the user with the username of the user that's running it. So in my case, it's my own username. You know, if you have a dedicated service account, you can put it here. The path to your project folder, you can change, you know, put this any path you want. And here you're going to say pipenv run prod. This is going to be for production service. So when you add the service on the server side, you will place this service into etc systemd. This is the path. It's going to be etc systemd system, and then the name of the service. So if you open this up, that looks exactly what you just saw, right? So that's your service file. And same thing for, so this is our web. Actually, sorry, this is, I pasted the wrong one. Give me a second. This is the web will look like this. So the web is not pipenv. When you see pipenv, think Python. For the web, we're thinking npm, right? Node.js and Vue.js. So it's the same idea. You're just running an environment for the Vue.js. We're going to create a new file called moviestar API.service. So that's your backend. And for this one, we're going to use pipenv. That's our Python. But they're virtually the same service scripts, just different exec starts parameters. When you're going to drop both of these files into your etc systemd system. Once you do that, you can see, if you look in that path, there's a bunch of services there. You know, the ones we're dropping are these two. Once you create new services, what you need to do is you have to tell your operating system to daemon reload, daemon, whatever it's called. This will reread all your service files. So if any changes in your service files, if you VI it or edit it, If there's a change to it, it's a new, or if it's a new file, you need to daemon reload. So if you daemon reload, now it's there. And now what you can do is run this whole thing from your service, systemctl, right? So if you do systemctl status movie star web, for example, it'll show you that it's running with all your parameters. So it picks everything up from your Vue.js, and you can see that it's running. Same thing with API. That's your backend. So very simple, right? So forgot to add this. So just keep that in mind if this is how you would run it on a service level.